Villain Izuku and the Heroine. The UA Sports Festival had reached its final and most anticipated stage. The stadium was packed, the air buzzed with excitement, and giant screens across Japan broadcasted the most important match of the event. The audience couldn't stop talking about the final battle, where two of the most promising students of the academy would face off, the daughter of All Might, Miyagi, and the son of the most feared villain in the country, Izuku Shigaraki. "Look! It's All Might's daughter," students in the UA crowd shouted excitedly, many of them being huge fans of hers. However, murmurs quickly spread as Izuku stepped into the arena. What is a villain's son doing here? Why haven't they arrested him? He doesn't belong in this event. No one knew exactly how the son of Japan's greatest villain had managed to enroll in UA, but for most people, that didn't matter. All they cared about was this fight. Both contestants had already proven to be far above the average student. The UA teachers exchanged worried glances. Watching from the stands, All Might had a tense expression, his anxiety evident. Meanwhile, All for One, observing from his hideout, remained neutral, giving away nothing about his true intentions. "Do you know what's going on here, Toshinori?" Nizu asked, his small face filled with doubt. "I have no idea, but whatever he's planning. I doubt it's anything good," All Might responded, still deeply concerned about the unpredictable twists this battle could take. And even more so, because the one fighting was his beloved daughter. Suddenly, Present Mike grabbed the microphone, his excitement resonating throughout the stadium. "Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for. The most anticipated fight of the tournament. Miyagi vs Izuku Shigaraki." At the center of the arena, Miyagi stepped forward. She was tall, with a strong, athletic build, her hands and legs wrapped in bandages. She wore a cropped sports top and short training pants, revealing her toned abs. With each step she took, the crowd roared louder. She greeted them with a bright smile, waving confidently to her cheering fans. On the other side, Izuku Shigaraki emerged. His long, dark blue hair fell softly over his forehead, and he wore a fitted black sleeveless suit, highlighting his lean yet toned physique, strong but not overly muscular. A mysterious tattoo on his shoulder caught everyone's attention, but what fascinated Miyu the most were his golden eyes. They seemed to peer straight into her soul, as if he could read every hidden thought in her mind. Present Mike continued, hyping up the battle while explaining the basic combat rules. "Remember, students. Give it your all, but no lethal attacks. Everything will be decided here and now, so show us your best." The stadium shook with the deafening roar of the crowd. The tension in the air was almost tangible. Everyone sat on the edge of their seats, anxiously awaiting the start of the fight. The cameras zoomed in on the two fighters, projecting their images onto the massive screens around the arena. Miyagi took a deep breath and positioned herself in a fighting stance. She spread her legs slightly, her right foot forward, her left firmly planted. Her knees were bent, and her bandaged fists rose in a boxing posture, blended with a more aggressive hand-to-hand combat style. Her calm smile contrasted with the explosive energy she seemed to hold in every fiber of her being. "I've been waiting so long for this fight." Her tone was firm, without arrogance, just pure excitement at facing someone she recognized as a true rival. Unlike the others, who saw Izuku only as the son of a villain, she saw a worthy opponent. Her instincts screamed that this battle wouldn't be easy, that Izuku was someone who deserved her very best. Izuku Shigaraki smirked confidently, tilting his head slightly as he observed her. "Let's see if the daughter of the symbol of peace can live up to her reputation." He raised a hand and, with a simple motion of his fingers, gestured for her to come at him. Miyu didn't hesitate for even a second. With a burst of speed, she launched toward him, closing the distance in a blink. Her right leg shot up in a kick aimed at Izuku's head, but he twisted his body with incredible agility, dodging by mere inches. Using her momentum, Miyu landed lightly and immediately shifted tactics. She lowered herself, using the strength of her legs to throw a punch straight at his abdomen, but before it could land, Izuku reacted. His hand caught her wrist with perfect precision, stopping the attack in its tracks. "Nice move, but if you don't use your quirk, you'll never beat me." Miyu smirked slightly, unfazed. "I won't use it, until you use yours." Izuku raised an eyebrow. Before he could respond, Miyu bent her knees and leaped over him, twisting in the air with impressive agility. She landed right behind him and, without giving him a moment to react, threw a powerful punch at his back. But Izuku had already anticipated her move. He pivoted effortlessly, dodging the attack with almost inhuman fluidity. They took a few steps back, locking eyes as they measured each other. Izuku grinned with amusement. "You're pretty bold for underestimating me, but you know what? Let's fight Quirkless." The stadium erupted in excitement. A battle without quirks between two of UA's top students was something no one had expected to witness. Miyu felt a thrilling shiver run through her body. "That sounds perfect to me." Without another word, they both charged at each other. The first exchange was a clash of fists. Miyu threw a straight punch, which Izuku blocked with his forearm. He countered with an elbow strike to her side, but she spun gracefully to dodge it and retaliated with a hook to his face. Izuku barely had time to move his head, taking the hit. But they didn't stop there. More punches, blocks, and impressive movements followed. Izuku aimed a low kick, but Miyu leaped at the last moment. She tried to catch him mid-air with a spinning kick, but he bent backward, avoiding it by mere millimeters. Miyu landed and, without losing momentum, went for a direct punch to Izuku's stomach. This time, she landed a solid hit, knocking the air from his lungs for a brief moment. TCH. Not bad. Izuku wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, his smirk never fading. The fight continued for 10 minutes. Both of them were breathing heavily, the first signs of fatigue creeping into their bodies. However, neither showed any intention of backing down. The crowd was going wild. No one blinked, no one wanted to miss a single second of the fierce battle. The cameras captured every movement with precision, amplifying the tension of the match. Izuku decided to change tactics. This time, he would take the offensive. In the blink of an eye, he dashed forward with incredible speed, closing the distance between them in an instant. Miyu reacted instinctively, tilting her head to evade the punch aimed straight at her face. But she didn't expect what came next. Izuku used the momentum of his attack and swung his elbow with brutal precision, striking her directly on the forehead. "Heh, don't get cocky." The impact forced her to take a step back. Her vision blurred for a fraction of a second, and she reflexively closed her eyes. That was a mistake. Because she wasn't fighting just anyone, she was facing Izuku Shigaraki. When she opened her eyes again, he was no longer in her field of vision. A chill ran down her spine. Danger wrapped around her like a suffocating fog. Her instincts screamed at her to move, but it was already too late. A pair of strong arms trapped her from behind. In one swift, efficient motion, Izuku locked her in a chokehold, securing her arms and tightening his grip around her neck. Miyu immediately felt the pressure, her breathing restricted. "Damn it! I let my guard down." She heard Izuku chuckle at her words. "With that innocent little face, I never thought I'd hear you curse." Even in this situation, Miyu smiled. "Heh. That's what you get for judging me by my looks." She struggled to break free, twisting her body forcefully, trying to find a weak point in his hold. But Izuku didn't make it easy. His grip was perfect, no gaps, no room for mistakes. If this continued, she would lose consciousness in seconds. Her ears rang. Her vision started to blur. She had no choice. "Heh. You don't even go easy on a girl," she murmured, her voice uneven. Izuku barely had time to react before a yellow spark flickered across Miyu's skin. In an instant, a surge of energy exploded from her body. A burst of crackling electricity radiated outward in a short-range shockwave, accompanied by a fierce cry. "Ahurk!" The force of the blast sent Izuku flying backward. Twisting in midair, he managed to steady himself just before hitting the ground, landing with a sharp impact and skidding across the platform to regain his balance. Miyu gasped for air, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Her muscles still trembled with electricity, and her eyes locked onto Izuku with renewed intensity. Every fiber of her being screamed to keep going, to return every hit with even greater force. This time, she would take the lead. Without warning, she vanished from Izuku's sight. Her speed was overwhelming, leaving only a streak of light in her wake. Izuku narrowed his eyes, trying to track her movement, but a chill ran down his spine. Right side. He barely turned his head when a lightning-cloaked fist appeared inches from his face. The impact was devastating. A deafening crack echoed through the stadium as Izuku's body was sent flying, crashing into the platform with an eruption of shattered concrete and dust. He skidded across the ground, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. The crowd held its breath. But it wasn't over. Izuku shot out of the crater with an agile leap, shaking off the dust. With the back of his hand, he wiped a thin trail of blood from the corner of his mouth. "So, now you're getting serious." His voice was steady, even excited. Miyu didn't respond. She didn't need to. She lunged at him without hesitation, and the fight raged on with unstoppable ferocity. She had the advantage. Her attacks were fast, precise, and relentless. Each strike thundered through the arena, forcing Izuku onto the defensive. A right hook slammed into his ribs, a knee strike sent him stumbling back, and a spinning kick nearly knocked him off the platform, but at the last second, he managed to regain his footing. Izuku was in trouble. Miyu knew it. And so did he. The decisive moment came when she charged her fist with energy and aimed it straight at his face. Boom! The punch detonated with explosive force, sending a thick cloud of dust billowing into the air, completely obscuring both fighters from view. The entire stadium fell silent, waiting in anticipation. All Might watched from the stands, his brow furrowed. Something didn't add up. He knew Izuku wouldn't go down that easily. And then, as the dust began to settle, the truth became clear. Miyu still had her fist extended, but she hadn't hit Izuku. She had punched nothing but air. Her eyes widened in shock. Right in front of her, Izuku stood completely unharmed. The wounds he had accumulated throughout the fight were vanishing before her eyes. Cuts sealed shut, bruises faded away. It was as if they had never been there. "I think you've had enough fun with me." Izuku rolled his neck, a faint cracking sound breaking the silence as he flexed his fingers with ease. "I tried to beat you without using my quirk, but I guess that wasn't enough." A sly smile spread across his face before he continued. "How about we make a deal?" Miyu didn't lower her guard, but her expression turned more cautious. Still, her smile never faded. "I'm listening." Izuku let out a quiet chuckle. He liked her attitude. "If I win, I'll ask for something, and you'll have to agree to it." Miyu narrowed her eyes. "And if I win?" Izuku's smirk widened. "You can ask me for anything, and I'll grant it." Silence stretched between them. Miyu considered his words. There was something about him that intrigued her. She knew that after the festival, Izuku would disappear. He wasn't a real UA student, he was here for unknown reasons, and once this was over, she would probably never see him again. But for some reason, she wanted to stop that from happening. She had never met anyone like him. At UA, boys always treated her with admiration because she was All Might's daughter, or they only looked at her for her beauty. But Izuku was different. With him, she felt at ease. And as crazy as it seemed, she wanted him to stay. Not in UA. With her. All right. She extended her hand with a defiant grin. "I accept the deal." Miyu's grip was firm, her eyes burning with determination. Izuku studied her for a moment before doing the same, his confident smirk never wavering. As their hands clasped together, a strange sensation ran through both of them. They couldn't explain it, but they felt something, a connection, unspoken yet undeniable. The audience watched in bewilderment. They couldn't hear what was being said, but the mere sight of them shaking hands in the middle of the fight was something no one had expected. The tension in the air grew heavier. Those closest to Miyu were uneasy about how comfortable she seemed with the son of all for one. Both took several steps back, preparing for the next phase of the battle. Izuku was the first to move. He extended his hand forward, and instantly, the ground trembled. From the platform, massive spikes of cement erupted, shooting straight toward Miyu. She reacted with lightning-fast precision, dodging each one with astonishing fluidity. The ones she couldn't evade, she shattered with her fists, reducing them to rubble effortlessly. Fragments flew in all directions, leaving a trail of dust and debris in their wake. "Is that all, Izuku?" Her tone was defiant, almost taunting. Izuku clicked his tongue and raised both hands. The ground roared once more, and suddenly, Two colossal sections of the platform rose up on either side of Miyu, like towering walls ready to close in on her. With a swift motion, Izuku clasped his hands together, and as if drawn by an invisible force, the massive slabs began converging, trapping her in between. Miyu frowned. She placed her hands on either side, trying to resist the crushing force. Her muscles tensed, her jaw clenched tightly. From a distance, Izuku watched with gleaming eyes. He knew he was increasing the pressure gradually, pushing her closer to her limit. Miyu clicked her tongue in frustration. She couldn't rely on brute strength alone. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes for a moment. The golden glow of her electricity intensified. One for all, 20%. She whispered it almost inaudibly, but Izuku heard it loud and clear. With a single push, the concrete slabs exploded outward, crashing into the ground with a deafening boom. Izuku barely had time to react before she appeared in front of him in the blink of an eye. Her speed had skyrocketed. Before he could defend himself, he felt a sharp impact against his chin. Her knee strike sent him flying several meters into the air. But Izuku wasn't the type to stay down so easily. Midair, he twisted his body and landed smoothly on the platform, as if the attack had barely fazed him. He was still smiling. His excitement was unmistakable. Pointing a finger at Miyu, he then gestured toward the ground. She frowned, confused. And then, it hit her. A crushing sensation took over her entire body. Her legs felt as if they were carrying the weight of a mountain. The ground beneath her cracked from the sheer force pressing down on her. "Damn it, my body feels so heavy," she muttered through gritted teeth, forcing herself to stay upright. Izuku let out a low chuckle. "Heh. I'll admit it, Miyagi, you're the strongest hero I've ever fought." He said it loud enough for the entire stadium to hear. A brief silence followed. And then, an explosion of cheers. The crowd went wild at his declaration, their excitement reaching a fever pitch. But up in the stands, among the pro-heroes, the reaction was entirely different. Some crossed their arms, frowning in clear disapproval. Endeavor, Mirko, and Ryukyu were the most visibly affected by those words. Mirko tapped her foot impatiently against the floor, irritation written all over her face. "That little punk. Next time I see him, I'm putting my hands on him. We'll see who's really the strongest." Cough, cough. Ryukyu fake coughed, raising an eyebrow at her. "Don't be immature." Mirko looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Have you already forgotten how he left you last time you fought him?" Ryukyu's face turned beet red in an instant. How could she forget? The day she met Izuku, they fought. The result? A stain on her record as a pro-hero. She had been left tied to a lamppost with nothing but a rope, like some low-level thug. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the damn photo. Izuku had taken a selfie while she fumed in rage and embarrassment, completely helpless. Ryukyu clenched her fists, eyes narrowing with barely contained fury. TCH. That was in the past. But anyone looking at her could tell, she still hadn't settled that score. Meanwhile, Endeavor remained silent. Arms crossed, gaze fixed on the fight, he didn't utter a single word. But his clenched jaw gave him away. Because he, too, had fought Izuku. And he lost. It happened somewhere with no audience. No one saw how he ended up on the ground, bruised and battered, while Izuku casually sat on his back, staring up at the sky as if nothing had happened. There were no witnesses, but that didn't make the humiliation any less real. Back in the ring, Miyu grinned at Izuku's declaration. She liked what he had said. Clenching her fist, her electric aura surged. Bright yellow sparks crackled around her, pulsing with raw energy. One for all. 50%. The air grew heavier. Her muscles tensed, swelling slightly from the overwhelming power coursing through her. And in a blink, she was gone. Izuku barely had time to react. She reappeared right in front of him, nothing but a lightning-fast blur. And slammed a brutal punch into his chest. The impact echoed throughout the entire stadium. Izuku was sent flying backward, tearing through the ground and leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. Before he could be thrown off the platform, he twisted in the air and landed firmly, stopping just in time to avoid falling. Wiping the blood from his lip with his thumb, he smirked. "Heh. "So you don't want to play anymore, Miyu-chan?" The teasing tone in his voice caught her off guard. That Miyu-chan sent a shiver down her spine. Only her father ever called her that, and he was only allowed to when no one else was around. Her face turned red in an instant. Izuku didn't miss the opportunity. His laugh was low and amused. "Huh? Did that embarrass you?" Miyu frowned, looking away. "Don't be ridiculous." But the flush on her cheeks betrayed her. Still smirking, Izuku reached up to the top of his combat suit and, without hesitation, tore it apart. The fabric gave way easily, revealing his well-defined torso, covered in scars from past battles. The stadium erupted in screams. The girls in the audience didn't even try to hide their excitement, some even chanting his name. Miyu crossed her arms and sighed, pretending not to care. "It's not even that impressive." But her gaze said otherwise. Izuku, with a sly grin, tilted his head slightly. "Miss, my eyes are up here, not on my abs. And by the way, wipe your nose." Miyu blinked. She touched her face and felt a faint warmth beneath her nose. "Shit." She quickly turned her back to him, wiping the tiny drop of blood away with the back of her hand. "I'm not a pervert. I never said you were. I just got distracted by something else, don't get the wrong idea." Izuku burst out laughing. He really liked this girl. With that kind of overwhelming power, he would have expected her to be arrogant and full of herself, but she wasn't. She was the complete opposite. There was even an almost childish side to her, one that he found genuinely charming. But now it was time to get serious. Izuku shifted into a combat stance. "This time, I'll only use my body to fight. No tricks, no external abilities. Get ready." Miyu, still with a slight blush on her face, also got into her stance. But Izuku noticed that small detail and had to hold back a laugh. Miyu noticed and narrowed her eyes. "If you laugh, I'll break your face." Izuku grinned even more. "And weren't you going to do that anyway?" No more words were exchanged. Izuku disappeared in an instant, leaving only a cloud of dust behind. Miyu barely had time to catch a whistle in the wind before she raised her arms in an X, boom. A descending kick hit her with the force of a meteor. Her knees buckled slightly from the impact. The ground beneath her feet cracked, forming a crater. "You have good reflexes." Izuku pushed down with more force. Miyu gritted her teeth and pushed against his leg, deflecting it with an explosion of energy. He spun in the air, landing smoothly with a somersault. But Miyu wouldn't give him a break. Before his feet even hit the ground, she was already on him. Izuku saw her punch coming at the last second. He crossed his arms to block it. Crack! The impact sent him sliding back several meters, his boots scraping the ground. That hurt. "Stop whining." Miyu appeared in front of him again. But this time, Izuku was faster. He ducked, dodging a right hook and, with a twist, delivered a kick to her ribs. The blow made her stagger. But before she could regain her balance, Izuku launched himself and drove his knee into her abdomen. Gah! Miyu felt the air escape her lungs. But she wasn't going to fall behind. Gritting her teeth, in a lightning-fast counterattack, she grabbed Izuku's leg before he could retreat. With a shout, she lifted him into the air and slammed him down onto the ground with force. The impact sent a cloud of dust up. But when the visibility returned, Izuku was no longer there. Miyu's eyes widened in surprise. "Where?" "Here." The voice came from right behind her. Miyu felt a chill run down her spine. Before she could react, strong arms wrapped around her waist. Izuku lifted her off the ground with an iron grip. Suplex. In a perfect move, he threw her backward, slamming her back onto the ground with brutal force. Arc. Miyu felt a sharp pain run down her spine as she slammed into the ground. The air left her lungs, and for a second, she saw flashes in her vision. But she couldn't afford to stay still. Quickly, she rolled to the side and jumped back up, putting some distance between herself and Izuku with an agile leap. Only a few seconds had passed. But her body was already feeling the effects of the battle. Izuku, still on the ground, propped himself up with a crooked smile. "Wow, I thought you wouldn't be able to take my special move." He teased, knowing she was irritated by what he had just done. Miyu shot him a deadly glare while flexing her fingers, feeling the electricity surge through her veins. Her breath was heavy. She knew she couldn't drag the fight on much longer without risking it. She gritted her teeth and took a deep breath. One for all. 80%. A wave of power rippled through the sand. The golden lightning that surrounded her intensified, crackling with fury. Her muscles tensed, and she felt a sharp pain in every fiber of her being. The power was immense, but so was the risk. If she didn't end this fast, her own quirk could hurt her. Izuku watched her, fascinated. So, that's your current limit. Impressive. Miyu didn't respond. There was no time for talking. In the blink of an eye, she vanished. The ground beneath her feet shattered into pieces under the pressure of her speed. Izuku barely had time to raise his arms when he felt a right hook coming straight for his face. His instincts kicked in just in time, and he blocked the punch, but the impact sent him sliding backward. However, before he could stabilize himself, bam! A precise knee drove into his stomach. His eyes went wide as the air left his lungs. Guh! The pain was unbearable. He bent slightly, trying to catch his breath, but Miyu wouldn't give him any time to recover. She spun on her axis and landed an upward kick to his jaw. Izuku shot into the sky like a projectile. The entire stadium held its breath. Miyu followed him into the air with monstrous speed. Izuku tried to regain his composure, but barely managed to look up when she appeared above him. This is where it ends. With both hands intertwined, she threw a downward hammer-like blow. Boom! The impact was devastating. Izuku fell like a meteor, his body crashing into the sand with terrifying brutality. A cloud of dust and debris soared across the platform. The silence in the stadium was absolute. No one dared to speak. Miyu landed gracefully, her chest rising and falling rapidly from the effort. The dust surrounding her still lingered in the air, creating an atmosphere heavy with uncertainty about the outcome. She wiped the sweat from her forehead with her hand and gave a mocking smile. That was for the suplex. Her voice carried a hint of satisfaction. This time, she was sure she had won. The entire stadium was silent, waiting in anticipation. But then, through the dust, a deep, raspy laugh echoed. Heh! I didn't know you had that vengeful side, Miyu-chan. Her heart skipped a beat, as she had put everything into that last move, believing she had won. The dust began to clear, and a figure emerged from the debris. Izuku Shigaraki was standing. Injured, yes. Covered in bloody cuts, too. But he was still there. And his smile remained unbroken. Miyu shook her head and let out a small chuckle. Izuku truly was a formidable opponent. She needed to defeat him. Not just for pride. Not just for the deal. But because, in her life, she had never met anyone like him. He was different. He made everything more interesting. She clenched her fist with determination, and her gaze reflected the excitement of the battle. This time, she would go beyond her limits. One for all. 85%. A thunderous crackle of electricity shook the stadium. The veins in her muscles popped, her body trembling from the overload of power. In the stands, All Might jumped to his feet, panic on his face. Stop the fight. She can't control this much power yet. He tried to move, but a small claw stopped his arm. It was Nizu. The UA principal looked at him calmly. Watch, Toshinori. All Might frowned, but Nizu continued. That kid. He may carry the name of a villain, but he's not one. And it seems your daughter knows that better than anyone. All Might looked back at the battlefield, seeing his daughter more motivated than ever. He wondered why she was pushing things so far. Was it really just about winning? Or was there something he didn't know? Whatever the answer was, he would be ready to jump in and come to her rescue if needed. Miyu was completely surrounded by golden electricity. And in front of her, Izuku Shigaraki fully emerged from the cloud of dust. As promised, he was sticking to his word of not using his other quirks to gain an advantage. He wasn't relying on his regeneration ability or any other power. He was only trusting his body. Only his pure resilience. But then, his expression shifted. His gaze hardened as he noticed the veins bulging in Miyu's arms. She was pushing her body beyond its limit. Why are you doing this? He asked, frowning. You still can't control that level of power. Miyu simply smiled. Her body screamed at her to stop. Every muscle was on fire. Every cell begged for rest. But she wouldn't stop. "I'll beat you." Her gaze burned with intensity. "And I'll make you honor the deal." Izuku narrowed his eyes, intrigued. But then, she murmured something else, so softly that it was almost inaudible. "This is the only way I can make you stay by my side." Izuku blinked. A warm sensation ran through his chest. It wasn't mockery. It wasn't manipulation. She was serious. His heart began to beat faster. And for the first time in a long time, he felt moved. He took a deep breath, straightened up, and flashed a defiant smile. "If you're going to surpass your limits, then so will I." He clenched his fists, and his aura shifted instantly. Violet lightning began to crackle around his body. The muscles of his body expanded, growing denser and more defined without losing their agility. The heroes in the stands felt a chill run through them. The air grew heavier. The ground trembled. Then, his voice boomed like thunder. Strength quirk. Vitality. Increased resistance. Overcoming limits. Diamond bones. Steel muscles. Power by 20. And when he shouted the last word, boom! The entire stadium shook. The stands vibrated. The lights flickered. Miyu's eyes widened. She had always known Izuku had multiple quirks. But now she felt the difference in power between them. And in the blink of an eye, Izuku disappeared. The wind howled violently. Miyu barely had time to react when she felt his presence right in front of her. His fist was coming straight for her face. In her vision, it wasn't a fist. It was as if an entire mountain was about to crush her. From the stands, all the heroes stood up. Miyu. And then, Izuku smiled. And at the last second, his fist changed direction. Boom! The impact of his punch exploded into the sky. A massive shockwave spread across the stadium. The heroes who had tried to rush in to stop him were thrown back by the brutal gust of wind, tumbling chaotically in the stands. The crowd screamed in shock. Miyu, still in her stance, felt the wind lash against her face. Her hair whipped violently. She didn't move. She didn't even blink. Izuku hadn't hit her. In the stands, Endeavor let out a deep laugh. Ha ha ha. Brainless fools. He watched the fallen heroes with amusement, including his eternal rival All Might. But his gaze returned to Izuku. He knew the strength of that kid. And he also knew that he truly wasn't a villain. Izuku exhaled and deactivated all his quirks. His body returned to its normal state. And with a satisfied smile, he collapsed to the ground. Miyu was speechless. She had no words. Izuku looked at her with a tired smile. "You won, Miyu-chan." His voice sounded defeated, but the smile on his face made it clear that he was satisfied with the outcome. He wanted to win, but something changed in him. He no longer tried to keep fighting. Because seeing her give everything to beat him had moved him. He stayed there, watching her with a slightly forced smile, as without using his regeneration quirk, his body ached, a sensation he rarely experienced. But it was fine, it was worth it for the awe on her face and that slight blush she couldn't hide. Miyu felt her heart race. The victory tasted sweet. But more than that, Izuku made her feel different. And for the first time in her life, the daughter of the symbol of peace didn't want to be the strongest. She wanted someone like Izuku Shigaraki to stay by her side. Miyu let out a long sigh, feeling the adrenaline start to fade from her body. She deactivated her quirk, and immediately, a strong cramp shot through her back and legs. Tisk. She grimaced, tightening her face. She had definitely overdone it. But seeing Izuku lying on the ground with a relaxed smile, all her pain took a back seat. She collapsed next to him, breathing deeply as the blue sky of the stadium stretched above them. For a moment, they didn't say anything. They simply shared the silence. Until she murmured with a faint smile, "Baka. You let me win." Izuku chuckled deeply. "So what if I did?" Miyu shot him a glare. "That takes all the meaning out of my victory." Izuku just smiled in amusement. "You wanted to win, I wanted to see what you'd do if you succeeded. I think we both came out on top." She puffed out her cheeks, pouting with annoyance. That's not fair. Izuku glanced at her sideways, his smile softening. Well, you won. So tell me. What are you going to order me to do? Miyu turned her head and whispered something, almost inaudible. Izuku blinked. I didn't hear you, repeat that. She cleared her throat and tried again. But her voice came out even lower. Izuku raised an eyebrow, leaning in a little closer to her. What did you say? I didn't catch that. Miyu, completely red with embarrassment, suddenly sat up and, without thinking, straddled him, placing her hands firmly on either side of his face. Izuku blinked in surprise. She did too. The whole stadium froze. The audience was dead silent. And then, PFFFFFFFFFFFFF. From the stands, All Might, who had been taking a sip of his soda at that moment, spat it out forcefully when he saw his daughter in that position. What? Mayuu. He sprang to his feet like a spring, a vein throbbing on his forehead. I'd rather die than let my girl be with that idiot. He tried to rush onto the field, but the teachers immediately held him back. Calm down, All Might. Aizawa shouted, holding him with his bandages. Hound Dog, his wild instincts kicking in, growled in fury. This is a battlefield, not a date park. Meanwhile, Midnight put a hand on her chin and gave a mischievous smile. Oh, they're so passionate. Watching them so closely at a moment like this is making me want to do something crazy, she said, licking her lips lasciviously. All Might spun around sharply. You're not helping. Mirko, arms crossed, let out a laugh. Damn, that little one sure has guts. Ryukyu sighed, pressing a hand to her forehead. This is a mess. Though I admit, it's entertaining. From the stands, the rest of the students watched the scene, mouths agape. Katsumi, Katsuki's twin sister, was bright red with fury. Miyu, get down from there before I hit you myself. Mina covered her mouth, excited. Oh my god, this is better than a soap opera. But inside the stadium, far from the chaos, Izuku and Miyu didn't hear anything. It was just the two of them. Their eyes locked. Their breaths intertwined. Miyu felt her chest tighten, but she gathered all her courage and finally said, I want you to be mine. Her voice came out in a trembling whisper. Izuku looked at her in surprise. Then, his smile softened. He raised a hand and gently caressed her face with the tips of his fingers. Say, I'm yours, and I'll accept it. Miyu felt like her face was going to explode from embarrassment. I am. She bit her lip, closed her eyes, and finally said it. I'm all yours. Izuku smiled. Miyu realized what she had just said. Her soul left her body. But then, she heard a small beep. She slowly opened her eyes and saw Izuku, holding his phone. The camera was on. There was a few seconds of silence until Izuku. Her voice was full of danger. Izuku grinned mischievously and shook the phone. Hee, now this will be saved forever. Miyu lunged at him. Delete it, idiot. Izuku, laughing, jumped up and ran off across the stadium. You'll have to catch me first, Miyu-chan. She chased him furiously. And the crowd watched them in complete amazement. As they ran across the stadium, Izuku suddenly moved agilely behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. Miyu froze. Don't be mad, Miyu-chan, he murmured in a warm voice. That I just wanted to save this moment. Miyu looked down, feeling her heart beat fast. But it's embarrassing, she whispered. Izuku laughed and pointed at something. She followed his finger. And then, her ears turned bright red. All the stadium screens were focused on them. And that's when she remembered. Everything was being broadcast live. Miyu felt like her life was over. Izuku gave her a little tap on the forehead to get her attention. Miyu. She looked at him, still processing everything that was happening. Then, Izuku smiled at her with tenderness. From today, I'll be in your care. She felt her heart melt. She closed her eyes and sighed in resignation, but also with a small smile. You really are something else. She looked at him softly. You too, Izuku. From now on, take care of me. But after that brief moment of intimacy, the world exploded in chaos. Social media exploded. The news couldn't talk about anything else but them. All Might's daughter is dating the son of a villain. The images of their declaration in the stadium went viral within minutes. Memes, theories, and debates between heroes and civilians soon followed. Some supported the relationship, while others said it was a betrayal of All Might's image. The newspapers came out with headlines like, "Love or Danger? All Might's daughter in the eye of the storm. Is Izuku Shigaraki following in his father's footsteps, or is he seeking redemption?" The tension quickly escalated to UA. And that's why, right now, Miyu was sitting in Nizu's office, sweating cold. Not only because the UA principal was standing in front of them, but because, in addition, her father and several top 10 heroes were watching her with stern expressions. And her boyfriend, yes, she could now call him that, was doing nothing to relieve the situation. Izuku was sitting with his legs crossed, resting his elbow on the armrest of his chair, and his chin on his fist. Smiling with his usual arrogance. He seemed to enjoy the tension in the room. "I have to admit it, brat." Mirko broke the silence, arms crossed. "You've got some damn guts, getting with All Might's daughter." Izuku let out an amused laugh. "Well, it was easier than beating you." A heavy silence followed his words. A prominent vein appeared on the heroine's forehead. "Do you want to say that again, shrimp?" Izuku just smiled smugly. Ryukyu, who was next to him, sighed in exhaustion. "You know you'll bring a lot of trouble to Miyu if you keep this relationship, right?" Izuku's smile vanished instantly. The atmosphere changed in a blink. An oppressive aura filled the room. The heroes felt the weight in the air become unbearably dense. It felt as if the weight of the world was trying to drag them down to the ground. Izuku looked at them with a cold gaze. "If anyone hurts my woman." His voice was calm but laced with threat. "That I'll do everything in my power to make them regret it." The heroes felt a chill run through their bodies. Even All Might tensed upon hearing those words. But before anyone could react, bam! A hard hit to Izuku's head made him deactivate his quirk immediately. The heroes sighed in relief. Izuku rubbed his head, looking surprised at Miyu, who glared back at him with a frown. "Baka." She scolded him sharply. "We came here to calm things down, not threaten the most powerful heroes in the country." Izuku blinked and then looked down like a child who'd been reprimanded. "Sorry." Miyu sighed and then turned to face the other heroes. "I know this is a problem." Her eyes were determined. "But I will accept whatever happens. I know Izuku isn't a bad person. With the right help, he can be a hero who inspires others in his situation." The heroes exchanged glances. There was skepticism, but also a glimmer of consideration. Nizu, who had been observing silently, finally spoke. "It's an interesting perspective." Everyone turned toward him. The small principal smiled as he took a sip of his tea. "Izuku Shigaraki, your power is exceptional. But your image is still tied to your father." Izuku clenched his jaw but didn't say anything. Nizu interlaced his fingers on the desk. "UA has always been a symbol of hope. And maybe it's time to show that it's also a place for second chances." The heroes looked at him in surprise. Nizu grinned even wider. "That's why I have a proposal for both of you." Miyu and Izuku looked at each other, expectantly. "Prove that you can be heroes together." The principal paused, enjoying the suspense. "From now on, you'll both be officially enrolled in a special elite training program. You will work side by side on supervised missions. And show society that even the son of a villain can be a symbol of hope." Silence. Until Izuku let out a low chuckle. He leaned forward, a defiant spark in his eyes. "So you want me to be UA's guinea pig?" Nizu smiled even more. "Call it an opportunity to change your destiny." Izuku thought about it for a moment. Then, he looked at Miyu. She returned his gaze with confidence. Izuku smirked. "Heh. Sounds fun." Miyu smiled. The heroes watched them with varying expressions. Some remained skeptical. Others intrigued. All Might sighed, closing his eyes in resignation. "Just promise me one thing." They both looked at him. All Might gazed at them seriously. "No matter what happens, don't take the wrong path." Miyu nodded firmly. "Never." Izuku just smiled. "Who knows? Maybe I'll end up surpassing you, old man." All Might growled, but a small smile tugged at his face. Meanwhile, from the shadows, a pair of eyes watched everything with interest. Someone who hadn't been invited to the meeting. Someone who had their own opinion about what was happening. AFO let out a low chuckle, resting his chin in his hand. Heh. How interesting. AFO exhaled with amusement, narrowing his eyes as the shadows of his lair enveloped him. His son, playing at being a hero. What irony. He had been watching everything, using his quirk to extend his presence beyond the walls of his fortress. But now, he let out a long sigh and released the connection. The atmosphere around him returned to its dark, suffocating calm. He sat in his throne, deep in one of his hidden fortresses. The lights were dim, barely illuminating the shelves filled with confidential documents, strategic maps, and records of old conflicts. His fingers, worn by time and violence, held something with unusual delicacy. It was a medallion. He slowly turned it in his hands, as if it were too fragile for him to touch. When he opened it, a tiny photograph was exposed to the weak light of the room. A woman. Her hair, blue, long, and silky. Amber eyes, full of life and warmth. Her lips curved into a sweet smile as she gently cradled her rounded belly with both hands. Her son still inside her. AFO ran his thumb over the image, a flash of nostalgia in his gaze. If you were here, you'd be proud of our Izuku. His voice was barely a whisper in the solitude of his lair. He clenched his teeth, feeling a lump form in his throat. Years ago, there was a time when he was willing to leave everything behind. To abandon his thirst for destruction. Because she showed him that the world didn't need more pain. That he wasn't condemned to be the monster everyone feared. For her, he almost believed he could be someone different. But fate took that illusion away from him. She died giving birth. And with her last breath, she took with her any trace of redemption that might have existed in his heart. So, he continued on his path. Because without her, there was no reason to change. However, for her memory, for her love, he never forced his son to follow him. He never imposed his hatred on him. And although he would never admit it to anyone, seeing Izuku find someone who could guide him down the right path, made him feel, deep within his rotten heart, a small flicker of relief. A part of him wondered if, maybe, just maybe, if his son achieved what he couldn't, could she finally rest in peace? AFO sighed, closing the medallion with a sharp click. He still had many things to do. But for now, he would let his son follow his own path. Meanwhile, at UA, Izuku and Miyu walked across the campus, drawing all eyes toward them. The rumors had already spread like wildfire. And now, the scene in front of the students only fueled the chaos. Izuku Shigaraki, walking casually with his hand intertwined with Miyu Yagi's. Some boys looked at him with obvious jealousy. The girls whispered among themselves, some even having hearts in their eyes. How the hell did that guy end up with her? She's All Might's daughter. TCH. It has to be some kind of trick. He probably hypnotized her or something. I don't know about you, but Izuku has that bad boy vibe, and it's really attractive. What? You too? God, he's a potential criminal. It doesn't matter, that arrogant smile of his kills me. But neither Izuku nor Miyu heard any of it. He was completely relaxed, while she was noticeably blushing. It was then that he leaned slightly toward her, a teasing smile on his face. The moment he took her hand, she blushed, unable to hide her reaction. Heh. Don't tell me this is your first time having a boyfriend. Miyu pouted, turning her gaze away, annoyed. I bet a fool like you is a beginner too. Izuku laughed with amusement but scratched his cheek with his free hand, feeling a bit awkward. Heh, you got me. This surprised her. From her perspective, Izuku was incredibly attractive. How was it possible that he had never had a girlfriend before? Curiosity instantly flooded her, so she leaned closer to him, her eyes sparkling with interest. Why did you decide to go out with me now? Izuku looked at her with a playful smile. He found her childlike side amusing. So, without warning, he gently cupped her cheeks with both hands and began caressing them with his thumbs. He liked the softness of her skin. Miyu turned as red as a tomato, but didn't pull away. In fact, she enjoyed her boyfriend's touch. Izuku smiled, though there was something deeper in his gaze. Because I wasn't interested in having a partner. He paused. Miyu was about to ask something else when, to her surprise, Izuku lowered his gaze slightly, and his face turned a faint crimson. His voice dropped to a whisper. That I fell in love with you at first sight. Miyu's heart began racing violently. She wanted to shout about how cute her boyfriend looked, embarrassed. Instead, she smiled, enchanted by the situation. Me too. She leaned in closer to him. I fell in love with you too, the moment I saw you. Izuku looked at her, surprised, as he hadn't expected her to feel the same. The murmurs of the students were immediate. What? No way. She fell for him too. Ugh. All my hopes are ruined. This is way too sweet. But I can't stop watching. But neither of them heard any of it. Izuku lowered his gaze to Miyu's lips. She noticed it immediately. With a shy yet determined voice, she whispered, "You know I'm yours. If you want it, do it." Izuku felt his heart race dangerously. Without thinking any further, he leaned in toward her. Miyu closed her eyes. And then, she felt something incredible. It was her first kiss. And it was perfect. Izuku's lips were warm, firm, but at the same time, they carried a sweetness that made her shiver. The world around them seemed to fade away. There were no whispers, no curious stares. It was just the two of them. Her heart pounded, almost desperately, as if trying to confirm that this moment was real. And then, almost instinctively, her body moved. Her arms wrapped around Izuku's neck, pulling him in closer. Izuku didn't hesitate. With a confidence that contrasted with the tenderness of the kiss, his hands slid down Miyu's back. Until one of them shamelessly cupped her backside, pulling her firmly against him. The touch made her gasp between kisses. Her cheeks immediately flushed, but instead of pulling away, she clung to him more. Between broken breaths, she murmured against his lips, "You're such a pervert." Izuku smiled against her mouth, amused. "But I love it." Izuku let out a low chuckle before capturing her lips again in another kiss. More intense. Hungrier. Bolder. Miyu felt her legs shake, her mind clouded by the sensation of Izuku's lips on hers, by his hands holding her so possessively. It was as if he was making it clear that he wanted her only for himself. And she was completely okay with that. However, while they were enjoying their private moment, a few meters away, a man was living his worst nightmare. All Might had gone completely still as he witnessed the scene. His face went through every stage of disbelief in a matter of seconds. First, his eyes went wide. Then his eyebrows started twitching. After that, his jaw tightened with fury. Finally, his skin turned a deep shade of red, his muscles tensed, and a throbbing vein appeared on his forehead. The two of them. What the hell do they think they're doing? Before he could take a single step toward the couple, multiple hands immediately grabbed hold of him. Endeavor, Mirko, Ryukyu, and Aizawa surrounded him in an instant, each holding him back with force. "Let go of me. I'm going to kill him. I swear on my legacy, I'm going to kill him." All Might roared, struggling to break free. "Calm down, old man. You can't kill him just because he kissed your daughter." Mirko growled, using all her strength to hold him back. "Kiss? That wasn't just a kiss. Did you see where his hands were?" All Might seemed about to explode. Ryukyu sighed, using all her strength to prevent the hero from taking another step. "Toshinori, please. Think about your public image." Aizawa nodded, not releasing his grip. It wouldn't be good for the symbol of peace to hit a student in front of the entire school. All Might turned his head toward them with a look of fury and desperation. "She's my daughter. And his anger was palpable. That brat is touching my Miyu. "Oh, believe me, we noticed," Mirko teased. "But if he's her boyfriend, you'll have to get used to it." "Never." Endeavor clicked his tongue, visibly irritated. "Forget it, you're going to blow up if you stay this angry." "That's exactly what I intend to do." "God, you're like a first-time father," murmured Ryukyu. In the midst of all the chaos, the only ones who had no idea of the madness they had caused were the ones responsible for it. Izuku and Miyu finally broke the kiss, breathing heavily. They looked into each other's eyes, both with flushed cheeks and knowing smiles. They were satisfied. And sure they had made the right choice. Still holding hands, they continued walking across the campus. Miyu clung to his back, resting her head against him. Izuku, on the other hand, seemed completely carefree. And without any shame, kept his hand on Miyu's backside as they walked. The murmurs and shouts from the students came quickly. At first, an absolute silence took over the campus, as if everyone were processing what they had just witnessed. Then, "That was so hot," yelled a girl with a completely red face, covering her mouth with both hands while jumping in place. "I can't believe they kissed in public like that," exclaimed another, her cheeks flushed as she clutched her uniform as if she were on the verge of an emotional breakdown. A group of guys, on the other hand, did not react with the same enthusiasm. One of them had his jaw clenched, fists trembling with rage, and his eyes flashing pure resentment. "Why does he keep touching her? Damn Shigaraki," he growled, a vein pulsing in his forehead. "I can't stand it." "Why that guy?" another whined, throwing his backpack to the ground in frustration. Meanwhile, a group of girls watched the scene with various reactions. One side, her eyes shining and a soft smile on her face. "Miyu looks so happy," she murmured, resting her hands on her cheeks. Her friend beside her pursed her lips, as if reluctant to admit the truth. But in the end, she sighed in resignation. "Ugh, I give up. They look cute together." Amid the comments and surprised glances, one more student observed the scene in silence, arms crossed and an eyebrow raised. "Well, I wasn't expecting them to be this bold. But hey, I respect their confidence." However, for Izuku and Miyu, nothing else mattered. The rumors, the exaggerated reactions, the indignant shouts, the curious glances, everything faded away when they were together. Izuku smiled with a look of arrogance, keeping his hand firmly on Miyu's backside, never letting go. She, with a bright smile and eyes full of love, rested her head on his shoulder, showing no hint of embarrassment for what her boyfriend was doing. Their steps were firm, assured, as if they were walking in their own world. Before, they were both used to walking alone. To not depending on anyone. To not expecting anyone to catch them when they fell. But now, things were different. This time, they had someone by their side. And no matter what the world said, they would be together forever. The end of the story. Before finishing the video, remember that videos in English will have this logo in the corner, so you'll know the theory is in English. I have several theories to translate, so support this video to keep translating the rest. On the right side, the last translated theory will be appearing.